Thank you for listening today, and I would like to discuss the effects of rumen-protected lysine on cows during the transition period. So briefly, I'd like to talk about the take-home message of this research, in which feeding rumen-protected lysine was able to increase usable amino acids, which resulted in likely a decrease in lipolysis, indicated by a greater body condition score postpartum. Additionally, there was an increase in lactation performance, which was indicated by increased milk component yields. Now I'd like to go into the background a little bit of the transition period, which consists of 3 weeks prior to calving until 3 weeks after calving. This is a very high stress situation for the cow in which there are large hormonal changes that induce the start of lactogenesis. Because cows are going from producing no milk to producing large quantities of milk, they go into a negative energy and protein balance. This is likely also due to the decrease in dry matter intake that is generally observed around calving. And therefore, it would be beneficial to implement stress mitigation strategies that allow for the cow to transition more smoothly during this time. And those may include maintaining intake and body weight after calving. And so digging a little bit deeper into the protein balance, previously, crude protein was used to characterize protein in the diet. However, more recently, metabolizable protein and amino acid quality and content are probably the most beneficial to use because they indicate exactly what the cow is receiving. And with this comes a limiting amino acid theory, in which a amino acid can be most limiting, and that results in a decrease in use of other amino acids. When this most limiting amino acid is included in greater amounts, the cow is able to utilize that amino acid and then therefore utilize other amino acids better. Typically in cow diets and dairy cow diets, lysine and methionine are most limiting. And by providing these two amino acids, or just providing lysine or just providing methionine, we're able to increase the most limiting amino acid, which allows for utilization of indispensable amino acids. And if we want to increase the absorption of lysine, we would need a lysine that is able to bypass the rumen and go directly into the small intestine. Because of this, we would use a rumen-protected lysine product. Additionally, lysine is a type 2 amino acid, which means that it will bypass the liver and go directly to the mammary gland. Once in the mammary gland, the cow can directly use lysine or indirectly use lysine to increase usable amino acids. This can then be used for maintenance. However, they can also be used for the fetus, the uterus, colostrogenesis, or lactogenesis, which is all very important during the transition period. Previous research on rumen-protected lysine and rumen-protected methionine has noted that there was an increased milk and milk protein yields when these amino acids were fed. In addition, the greatest response was usually during early lactation. It was hypothesized that this occurred because of feeding these amino acids prepartum. However, a limitation with these studies has been that feeding of rumen-protected lysine and or methionine was continuous throughout the transition period, which makes it impossible to determine if feeding these amino acids prepartum or postpartum was most beneficial to the cow, or if they need them during the entire transition period. And because of that, our objectives were to determine the effects of feeding rumen-protected lysine prepartum, postpartum, or both on production and lactation performance. And so rumen-protected lysine was topped dressed daily with 300 grams of molasses to ensure that the cows consumed this product. Additionally, cows were blocked by body condition score, previous milk yield, and lactation number. A 2x2 factorial design of treatments was used, in which cows either were with or without lysine prepartum or with or without lysine postpartum. This schematic depicts the treatments during the prepartum and then postpartum period. Cows in C were without lysine prepartum, and this is depicted by the blue C, and cows in L were with lysine prepartum, as depicted by the orange L. After calving, cows either stayed in their initial treatment or crossed over to the other treatment. This resulted in treatments of CC, which was without lysine pre and postpartum, CL, which was without lysine prepartum and with lysine postpartum, LC, which was with lysine prepartum and without postpartum, or LL, which was with lysine pre and postpartum. Our statistical analyses consisted of an effect of prepartum or pre, an effect of postpartum or post, and this was a supplement or the providing of rumen-protected lysine prepartum or postpartum, and the repeated effect of time. We also had an interaction of pre and time, post and time, pre and post, pre and post, and time. I would like to briefly discuss the chemical composition and the TMR that we fed to the cows. And so in the TMR, most notably, we did not use blood meals so that it would depict what is typically used in the industry now, and we would decrease any additional bypass lysine that flowed into the intestine. Additionally, we also utilized a rumen-protected methionine product. And our starch content did not increase greatly from prepartum to postpartum, which was done to decrease the likelihood of metabolic disorders that would occur with a great increase in starch content. Additionally, crude protein is not the best way to characterize protein, but I would like to note that it did increase from prepartum to postpartum. This table depicts the intestinally available lysine and methionine as predicted by AMTS. And so most notably, I would like to depict that prepartum, when lysine was supplied to the cow, there was a greater amount of metabolizable protein in the form of lysine. And there was an equal amount of methionine provided to the cow prepartum in both treatments. This is going to be the same postpartum, in which the grams per day of lysine was greater in cows that were in the L treatment and lesser in cows that were in C, and methionine was the same. And now I'd like to jump into the results, and this table depicts the prepartum production performance, in which most notably there was a pre-bi-week interaction for body weight, in which cows that consume lysine prepartum had a greater body weight the 2 weeks prior to calving. This next table is going to be production performance postpartum, and there was an effect of prepartum consumption of rumen-protected lysine on dry matter intake, which is depicted by this graph, in which you can see on the x-axis there's weeks relative to calving, and prepartum during the -4 through 1. There's no difference in dry matter intake. However, after calving, cows that were in LL, as depicted by the orange line, show that that was the greatest amount of intake, and cows that were in CC, which did not consume lysine pre or postpartum, had the blue dashed line. Additionally, body condition score was also affected and had a post-bi-week interaction, in which rumen-protected lysine provided postpartum increased body condition score. We hypothesize that this may be due by an increase in carnitine. Carnitine is produced by lysine and methionine, and therefore the increase in lysine may allow for a greater amount of carnitine to be formed. Carnitine is needed to transport fatty acids from the mitochondria or into the mitochondria to allow for beta oxidation to occur. And therefore, an increased efficiency in beta oxidation and therefore utilization of energy stores may have allowed for greater body condition score. Additionally, there was also greater insulin concentration in plasma when cows consume rumen-protected lysine postpartum, which may further elucidate why there was a greater dry matter intake. And because insulin will favor storage over lipolysis, that may also be why there is greater body condition score. Additionally, rumen-protected lysine prepartum increased energy-corrected milk, fat-corrected milk, and milk component yields postpartum. As we can see in these figures, the lysine, which would be indicated by a orange line. Cows that consume lysine had greater yields in all these components. When we want to look a little deeper into the milk fatty acid content of cows consuming rumen-protected lysine, there was a tendency for lesser preformed fatty acids. Preformed fatty acids usually occur when the cow is utilizing body stores to make the fat in milk, and therefore a lesser preformed fatty acid content would likely indicate that these cows are having to mobilize less in order to make the fat. In addition, mixed fatty acids also had a tendency to be greater in fat when cows consume rumen-protected lysine prepartum. Mixed fatty acids are generally greater in de novo fatty acids, which are formed when fat is produced from nutrients being consumed, and then likely the production of acetate in the rumen. This is further elucidated by a decreased BHB content at 7 days postpartum when cows consume lysine prepartum, indicating that they were mobilizing less body stores in order to meet their nutrient demands. And so overall conclusions of this study are that rumen-protected lysine was able to increase usable amino acids, which resulted in an increase in insulin. Insulin was able to, an increase in insulin likely resulted in increased dry matter intake and a greater body condition score, and this likely resulted by a decrease in lipolysis. In general, there was a greater lactation performance as indicated by an increased energy corrected milk yield. And with that, I will take any questions.